right, so let me ask you the first and most obvious question. If you had been one of the deliberating jurors, would you have come up with the same verdict?
I would think so. I think that when the trial ended and we went on our way, that we had real confidence in that group of 12 that they would come up with the right decision. They're a very sincere group and had worked hard on it for several months and had all the testimony and evidence in front of them, and I'm sure they worked hard on it. So I can support their decision for sure.
But even apart from supporting it, and I think that anyone who appreciates the jury system is going to say, look, this is the verdict and it is what it is. But now asking you on your own to evaluate it, would you, the minute you left, when the judge said thank you, we'll let you know if we need you, did you walk away from there thinking you would find Michael Jackson not guilty on all the charges?
No, I walked away realizing that I needed deliberation, and while I had some leanings, it was really a decision to be made all 12, and I needed to review a lot of the testimony because, we heard so much in that period of time that you had to put it all together. You had to connect the dots, and then you had to identify some of the truth that hadn't been coming through.
So it was a close case for you?
Yes. It's tough to get to a verdict of without reasonable doubt.
Yeah. And so you think
that
was the issue, was the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt?
I think that is a big issue in it, yes.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me read you this from juror number 1. When he spoke out, said something I thought was real interesting. Michael Jackson probably has molested boys. I cannot believe that after some of the testimony that was offered, I can't believe that this man could sleep in the same bedroom for 365 straight days and not do something more than watch television and eat popcorn. That doesn't make sense to me. But that doesn't make him guilty of the charges that were presented in this case, and that's where we had to make our decision. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, there's a pretty strong body of evidence on both sides of this decision. But again, not having been in the deliberation room with them, I would not second-guess the conclusion that they came to.
Right, but look, I'm not asking you to second guess. I mean, for example, I think that they put together a very strong case with regard to the other allegations of molestation, but a weaker case with regard to this boy and this family. And I think that's sort of what juror number 1 is saying. It's saying Michael Jackson probably has molested boys. Did you come to that conclusion at the end of the case?
Well, first of all, I don't recall number 1 saying that.
He said it to the Associated Press, not in the press conference. He said it afterwards.
Well,
yeah.
Dan, I wouldn't want to comment on that.
Okay.
I heard Ray say that he had some feelings going into it, and he still got some feelings coming out. Now, what does that mean in detail? I don't know. Maybe it means what you said. But, there is a strong bit of facts connected with a verdict going the other way. But, I think Tom Mesereau did a very strong job of building doubt and calling the family a pack of liars. Yeah. And there were lies going on. Some of them were innocent, but obviously some weren't.
Let me ask you about that. So let me play the piece of sound I was looking for before. And this is a number of the jurors talking about the mother of the accuser in this case.
I might be speaking maybe for myself and a few others, jurors, that, what mother in her right mind would allow that to happen, or just freely volunteer your child, to sleep with someone, and not just so much Michael Jackson, but any person for that matter.
I disliked it intensely when she snapped her fingers at us. That's when I thought, don't snap your fingers at me, lady.
I was very uncomfortable with that. A lot of the witnesses looked over at us from time to time, but then they'd look back, but she didn't take her eyes off of us.
Boy, Mr. Luke, it sure sounds like the jurors really detested the mother of the accuser in this case.
Well, Dan, I know that you were in the courtroom quite a bit. I don't know if you saw her, but, you know, that's a woman who's been through 17 or so years of physical abuse. She's been through a lot. And, you know, a mother with a 12-year-old boy understands that, you know, he really needs a man in his life. And it appears that there's been 3 or 4 of them who have become very close to Michael Jackson, and of all of that same kind, where they do not have a father in the house. But that, again, does not, you know, prove guilt. Janet is an unusual person in some respects. She's struggling to I think, do the best thing for her family, but she comes across as a different person in the courtroom.
Final question, let me just ask you this. Am I reading you wrong if I say that when you left to go on your own and the jurors went to deliberate, that you were more inclined to find him guilty of something than this verdict showed?
I'd rather not say how I was leaning, but I definitely could not have made a decision. I needed to review testimony, and I really needed to have some discussions with people about the lies and which ones were meaningful and which ones weren't, because there were some going on both sides. And you had to make some judgments on some of these witnesses.
Charles Luke, I know it must have been frustrating to be an alternate juror and not get to actually deliberate the case, but thank you very much for taking the time to come on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
NBC's Mike Taibbi was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. All right, Mike, you know, look, it sounds to me like Mr. Luke might have been someone who might have gone a different way on the jury, but who knows? You were inside the courtroom watching those jurors as the verdict was delivered. At least one of them was crying, right?
Yeah, it was very emotional in court, and I think what you heard in Mr. Luke's voice is the internal debate so many people had, so many reasonable people, and in this case people who were knowledgeable about this case, about which way to lean. And what you really heard was the distinction, the semantic distinction between the words not guilty and the word innocent. A lot of people in Jackson's camp are going to be saying this proves he's innocent. Well, in the minds of many people, even people on this jury, it's quite clear they don't believe that at all. And Mr. Luke seemed to be wrestling with that even as he was answering your questions. And I have to tell you, and you know this too, Dan, because you've been sitting with people too who've been involved in the coverage of this case, that very informed people who thought very hard about all this evidence have found it difficult to side on one side without conceding that the other side has validity. There are two polar opposite points of view about the facts not in dispute in this case. As one juror said, the one who was quoted by the Associated Press, I think he's a child molester. I think he's done it in the past, but it didn't meet the standard of beyond reasonable doubt in this case. And that, to me, is the beauty of our system, Dan. You're a lawyer, you know. I studied law, and I know it too. This is a system of laws and not of men. That's political correctness. But, you know, the people, the human beings who watch this case think there's got to be something wrong with this guy. But if you follow the law, you have to say that in this case, it was not proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
In 37 years, I've never quarreled with a jury's verdict, and I'm not going to start today.
You mentioned the celebrity factor. Do you think that's played a key part?
Well, it seems to us, but maybe we're just looking for explanations in the wrong places. I don't know.
What mother in her right mind would allow that to happen, or just freely volunteer your child, to sleep with someone, and not just so much Michael Jackson, but any person for that matter.
We looked at all the evidence. We looked at Michael Jackson, and one of the first things we decided that we had to look at him as just like any other individual, not just as a celebrity. And once we got that established, that we could go beyond that, we were able to deal with it just as fairly as we could with anybody else.
We actually challenged one another in the deliberation room. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that this was a really slam dunk deal where you just go in to a room and 12 people agree. I don't think 12 people can agree on anything except that the sun might come up tomorrow morning. And beyond that, you got to talk about it. And we did talk about it. We challenged the issues, and we came to the decision that pointed to reasonable doubt.
Let's talk about this Michael Jackson story. It's a clean sweep for Michael Jackson. NBC's Mike Taibbi has been covering the trial from the very beginning. He's outside Jackson's Neverland ranch this morning. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. Well, after a trial that consumed a winter and a spring, the saga of the most internationally famous celebrity ever brought to trial on serious felony charges finally came to an end. A nervous Michael Jackson summoned from his Neverland home, a packed courtroom awaiting him, then the audio feed of the verdict.
Count 1, verdict. Not guilty. Count 2, not guilty. Count 3, not...
One by one, 10 times in all, Jackson heard the words "not guilty" to each of the charges against him. And outside the courthouse, his fans heard it too. It turned out the jurors never bought the story told by Jackson's now 15-year-old accuser, at least not beyond a reasonable doubt. Perhaps even more critically, they couldn't stand the boy's mother, who in 5 days on the stand put on a performance that was by turns baffling, incredible, and off-putting.
I disliked it intensely when she snapped her fingers at us. That's when I thought, don't snap your fingers at me, lady.
One juror said he believed Jackson might have molested a child in the past. Another juror said she didn't like Jackson's admitted practice of sharing his bed with boys, but said the mother in this case had to share the blame.
What mother in her right mind would allow that to happen?
For District Attorney Tom Sneddon, the verdict was a total wipeout after a dozen years of pursuing child molestation charges against Jackson. He said it wasn't personal.
My past history of Mr. Jackson had absolutely, unequivocally, nothing to do with our evaluation of this particular case.
And he said he'll put this verdict behind him.
You never look back, you always look forward.
Not so Jackson's family, who gathered last night at Neverland and repeated their belief that the whole case was a conspiracy against Michael.
The people who are in authority weren't so nice. And you know who I'm speaking of. Those were the ones who weren't so nice and who concocted this whole thing.
But conspiracy theories are on the back burner right now. What matters to the Lord of this manor is that 12 of his neighbors, none living as grandly as he, agreed to see him and judge him on the evidence, just as his attorney had urged them to do.
He's someone else, just like anyone else, who deserves a fair trial.
The trial over, another juror said she'd start thinking about it and reading about it in about a month. For now, she said, she is all Jacksoned out. Matt?
And that may apply to you too, Mike. Nice job covering this trial over the last several months. Thanks very much.
MSNBC's Jennifer London is outside of his ranch in Los Olivos, California. Jennifer, good day to you.
Hi, Lester. Well, Michael Jackson is certainly keeping a low profile today. No sign of the pop star as of yet. And he has not spoken publicly since he was acquitted on all 10 felony charges yesterday. But we did see his father, Joe Jackson, just a few moments ago. He made a very quick departure from Neverland Ranch. He did not speak with reporters this morning, but yesterday he came out and he addressed a rather large group of fans. And Joe Jackson said, look, come back another day. My son is simply not feeling well. With that being said, we are seeing outside the gates here this morning a couple of fans. When we arrived early this morning, there was one woman tucked under a sleeping bag. Presumably she spent the night outside the gate, and literally fans are coming from all over the world. They are sending messages of love and support for Jackson. We are seeing these heart messages, hundreds of them lining the fence here outside the gates from all over the world. As I said, we've got some from Vienna, Austria, and we've got one from Hungary, and there's another one from Australia. So some may be wondering, where is the party? Is Michael Jackson going to open his gates and let folks into Neverland Ranch? Well, I spoke with one fan this morning who did not want to go on camera, but he told me he really doesn't think it would be appropriate for Michael Jackson to have a celebration just yet. And Jackson's lead defense attorney, Tom Mesereau, said the scene last night inside Jackson's ranch was not one of a celebration so much. He said he was gathered there with his friends and his family, and he said it was more a serious expression of gratitude. Lester?
All right, Jennifer London, thank you.
Santa Barbara District Attorney Tom Sneddon has spent well over a decade investigating alleged molestation charges against Michael Jackson. On Monday, his latest attempt to prosecute the pop star ended with a resounding rejection of the charges as the jury found Jackson not guilty on all 10 charges against him. This morning, District Attorney Sneddon is joined by his deputy DA, Ron Zonen. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Sneddon, let me begin with you. You've had a day to reflect on this verdict. Any regrets?
No.
How confident were you when you heard that the verdict was in? All along, we've heard people say that this jury was just so hard to read. Tom?
Well, I've been a trial lawyer all my life, and everybody knows you never try to guess what a jury is trying to do. So to say that you're confident about a jury's verdict in any case, whether it be a simple DUI or a murder case, you'd be a fool. But we felt that we did a very good job, that we put on a persuasive case, one with credibility, and we still feel that way. So obviously we're disappointed by the outcome, but that's why we have a jury to make those decisions. But in terms of us, I wouldn't do anything different.
Yeah. Mr. Zonen, how about you? We saw you try a lot of this case, examining witnesses, cross-examining witnesses. Any regrets on your part?
No, not at all. And I've been asked that question, knowing what we know today, would we go ahead and file this case? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, we had a young child who we sat and talked to. We spent many hours with this young man, and we found him to be entirely credible. It passed had the ring of truth to it, and it was entirely consistent with what 2 other boys had told us 10 years earlier. We had absolutely no reason to disbelieve him then. We have no reason to disbelieve him today. We certainly would have filed this case, even knowing what we know today.
Hi, welcome to my official website, MJJ Source. First of all, I want to thank my fans all around the world for continuing to show your love and support. Since the launch of MJJ Source, I have been able to communicate with the world through my website to make sure that you always hear the truth directly from me. It is my pleasure to announce the launch of my official MJJ Source membership. Remember, the best is yet to come. Thank you for visiting me at mjjsource.com. I love you, and God bless.